Hi, everyone. Good to see you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome to Game Changers. Excited for our 11th episode today as we are having people join us live and in person. Feel free to drop your name and location in the chat so we can know where everyone is calling in from. And so welcome to everybody who's watching live or those who might watch a little bit later. Excited to see a great group and some interesting topics today. And while people are doing that, I have just a light question for our panelists before we introduce them. If you could give your younger self any advice before you got into this career that is HR or people or talent, what do you wish you would have known or said to yourself?
Jerry, you were so deep in thought. I feel like you need to go first. I was like, Jerry's got something
There's
good.
some serious reflection going on there.
I'm trying to think of anything that's helpful. I was thinking of a story of I joined HR in a decade where it wasn't very cool and it didn't exist within school. And I remember saying to a friend that I had joined in a job doing HR consulting. I was based in Tokyo, and she's like, you're going in HR? Like, why would you do that? And it was one of those moments where I'm sure we've all probably have had those moments where you've had to explain what you do, right? I always think about what I do and how I would explain it to my mom or my kids. And I remember and I've used that for a good point of the time, but I'm like, I think just I don't know that I have any advice. I was lucky that I got in the same job that I took one of those psychometric tests, like what should you do when you grow up type of test, because I was graduating undergrad and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And all I knew was I wanted to see the world. And so I took one of those tests at the career counseling center. And the three things that came up were HR manager, rabbi, which I clearly didn't take that route, and consultant. And so I ended up becoming an HR consultant. And so, I would say my younger self is go with your, trust the things that you're good at and go with your gut, because I think if I had hindsight, I'm like, it's matching, understanding people, understanding business, and how do you find the two? And so, and I would tell myself, make sure you take that test, because it worked out for me.
It's impressive you were taking career tests. I feel like I was only taking, which Hogwarts house are you in test.
Oh, see, Janelle, I'm a little bit older than you. That's probably why. I mean, I took that too, and the BuzzFeed survey at some point.
Yes.
Yeah, which superhero are you? I mean,
That's great.
I love that. I'll go next, and then Sarah Lynn, maybe I'll pass it to you. I'll actually give a piece of advice. So I've not been in HR that long. I've been an exec at a few different roles and functions. So I kind of grew up in the strategy and operations side of the business, and then moved into the CHRO role. So a bit of an a la carte menu of jobs. So there's a woman on my team. Her name's Angela Fontaine, super talented, longtime HR leader and professional. And she said to me when coming in, I said, do you have any advice for me? And she said, just know that you will never make 100% of the people happy. And there will be pockets who are happy. There will be pockets that are unhappy. Even the best laid, best orchestrated plans that feel like they're airtight, there will be pockets of the business that are grumbling. Of course, you don't want outsized pockets of the business grumbling, but
sure.
She's like, you just need to release yourself of the fact that you will not be everyone's favorite person. And so I'm still trying to come to terms with that, but it's going okay. So that was not my own advice for myself, but very good advice that is quite grounding for me.
That is great advice.
Yeah. Great. And I'll go next. Yeah, I loved this question. It was very thought-provoking. And so when I think about it, what advice I would give to my younger self, I would definitely say, don't wait for that invitation, that seat at the table that we're always talking about. Really carve that space out for yourself. And the way I think you do that is by knowing your customer. And when I say customer, I say employees. Those are the workforce and people that you're serving. And so by understanding your customer and your team, you're able to build that trust, and essentially you earn that seat at the table every day. And so don't wait for the invitation, carve out that space for yourself,
When I first joined sort of the HR community about 18 years ago, gosh, it's evolved so much. It started as personnel, then it became HR into people operations, and now it's really seen as that strategic thought partner. But it took a lot of people in this space to not wait for that invitation and to carve out that space for themselves. So that would be the advice I would give.
Well, great. Well, that was a fantastic way to start. I'm going to go ahead and pop open our agenda here. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yay. Fantastic. All right. Well, we are going to get started. And so today we are here to talk about the future of HR leadership. I'm Janelle Henry. I'm really excited to be moderating. Thank you for everyone who has joined. Please continue to put your name in the chat, as well as if you have questions that you would like to ask our panelists live. We will definitely be revisiting those from time to time. So just go ahead and drop them in. And if this is your first time to an HR Game Changers session, welcome. If this is your 11th time, thanks for being a repeat customer. But this is a multi-themed, multi-episode series. This is our 11th episode. And today we're talking about CHROs, how they evolve from strategy executors to strategy architects, which is a word I definitely love and I think really resonates with what we're doing in this space, how we shape the vision, how we influence direction and drive business success. And if you have any peers or colleagues that would like to be in on the fun, I will drop the link on how they can participate and view this as well. All right. So before we get into the introductions of our amazing panelists, I just wanted to say thank you to our sponsor here, GoProfiles. If you're not familiar with them, they're an amazing people platform that uses AI-powered profiles, directories, and peer recognition to boost connection, visibility, and collaboration. And I'm Janelle Henry. I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm also a huge fan of the product. The company that I advise for, Red AI, has been a long-term client, and we have really loved seeing how this has brought so much of our recognition and celebration to life. So just want to say thank you for that. And GoProfiles started this HR Game Changer series to spotlight amazing leaders like the three women we have on the call today who are redefining the role. And each episode is about 45 minutes long, where CPOs, CHROs, and other people leaders share real-world insights and connections on innovation on today's workplace. So we're excited you're here. Thanks for sharing all of your information. And it looks like we've got a video here. I don't know if we can hear that, so I'm going to move that one along. And then before we get started into introducing our panelists, I wanted to also share something new. We're kicking off a two-part HR survey series designed to help you highlight how you lead and where HR is headed. So the first part is, what is your HR leadership style? You can take one of their fun little quizzes, just like the BuzzFeed quizzes we were talking about. So if you missed those from the 90s or 2000s, you can take a quiz to uncover your leadership approach and get a badge to share with your network. And then we are also encouraging people to contribute to their 2026 State of HR report by sharing perspectives on AI, culture, employee experience, and you can discover your style at GoProfiles. I will also add that to the link. So let's do some introductions. So excited with the group we've got. Like I've said, I think I've introduced myself 3 times now, but let's make it a 4th. I'm Janelle Henry. I have spent the last 20 years working in HR, talent, brand. Most recently, just joined Stripe to work there, and prior to that was at Red AI, a Series C startup in the healthcare tech AI space, and then a long stint at Facebook/Meta. I'm in the Bay Area, and I'm really excited to be talking to these fantastic humans today. So with that, I'd like to ask each of you a question. It's the way we always start. And Robin, we're going to look to you first. If you could share with us your first paying job and your most recent job.
Sure, I'm happy to. Let's see, my first paying job, I was the deli girl and ran the cash register, which was pretty elite for my town at our local general store. And when I say general store, it's the one you're picturing in your mind that looks a little bit like it was transplanted from the Wild West, and the pillars are crooked and it looks like everything's pretty dilapidated. So I make a mean sandwich. If anyone ever would like a chicken sandwich or a turkey sandwich, I'm your gal. And of course totally not legal. I was being paid under the table. Definitely was not working age. I think I was like 12. And I think it was my longest standing stint. I was probably there for, I don't know, 10 years or something before I finally decided to embark on
Did you
a
get to name a
professional.
sandwich after yourself? Is there the Robin that we could order?
Missed opportunity. That would be a good icebreaker. If you could, if you had a sandwich named after you, what would be in it? So that was number one. And then the most recent paying job, as Janelle said, I'm the chief people officer over at Gainsight. I've had multiple career evolutions at Gainsight, so I'm lucky to have been there about 6.5 years through VC to PE and all the journeys between those. And so right now I lead our people function, and we are distributed across multiple countries. So very lucky to work with everyone from Europe to Japan to India, and Tel Aviv. So we've got a really amazing crew, and it's a privilege to represent them. So that's what I'm doing right now. Amazing. And they do pay me, so it qualifies.
Great. Well, maybe they can also make a sandwich for you one of these days too. That can be on
things
your
to aspire to.
You know the people who run the benefits, right? So make it happen. All right, thanks. All right, next I'd like to welcome Jerry Doris from JustWorks. Hi, Jerry.
Hi. I'm like, I want a sandwich named after me now. I'm like really thinking about like, what do I want in it? I loved this question because I was like, gosh, what was my first paying job? Because I think I have a similar experience to Robin, where I'm like, I have been working, I think, as long as I could. And I was always working multiple jobs. I like to go back to the one that I remember that I feel is so analogous to what we do now, which I think everybody is from the US that's joining. I was an RA in college, and I feel like that was like such a great foundation. I was self-funded, as they say, for college. And so I was always looking for ways to like make money. And I remember becoming an RA and learning like your first opportunity to do investigations and conflict management. And so for me, it was like such a great, I guess, foray into like a lot of the things that you would do as an HRBP, and in conflict management and how dealing with that and in general. And so I loved my time as an RA. I still am friends with like many that were on my halls and my areas. And so it was just a really great way to meet a lot of people and also just learn people's stories. And so that was the one that I think is like so fundamental and foundational to like what I do now. What I do now is I'm the chief people officer at a company called JustWorks. We are based in the financial district of New York City. I look right out at the Brooklyn Bridge. I have a handful of my team members actually are joining us today. And they also pay me, Robin, which is good. But what we do here at JustWorks is we are an HR tech and solutions company that is supporting and servicing small businesses so that they can grow with confidence. And so I'm super excited to be able to represent them today. And I'm also happy that several of my team members are joining us.
Amazing. Well, shout out to the JustWorks team.
Yeah. And I see some people that I actually worked with before, like Annie from Grand Rapids. So we go back to our Groupon days. So
amazing.
Such a small world.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Jerry. It's great to have you. And then last, Sarah Lynn. Welcome.
Great. Thanks so much. Super excited to be here. This is such a fun question. It definitely took me down memory lane. But my first paying job, actually, I'm in the Bay Area, was actually working as a front office receptionist at a hair salon in the mall. So Janelle, you said you're in the Bay Area. Not sure if you're familiar with the Regis hair salons, but
yes.
So way back then, I remember being excited to get my work permit. You had to be 14 and a half to legally work here in California. And that was my first job. And I learned a lot there. Just it's always interesting because, you know, when we're describing the work that we do in HR and people operations, a lot of what comes with those responsibilities is sometimes that work therapist. And so similarly, working in a hair salon, I got exposed to that early on, just learning about people and understanding, you know, people challenges and complexities. It was intriguing. Also time management, that certainly helped and kind of set the way for me. But that was my first paying job. Now I'm at Sonus AI. It's a speech technology company really looking to, you know, break break the barriers in communication, making sure that the AI we're providing actually helps individuals in the work that they have versus replacing individuals. And so super excited to represent the team today and contribute to this session.
Amazing. Well, it's great to have everybody. So let's move us along. So today we are going to talk about the following things, as well as any of the questions that our audience members have. So again, encourage you to add things to the chat that you're curious about, but we will be covering beyond order taking, how HR leaders can move from executing business strategy to co-creating it, HR's strategic seat at the table, examples of how top companies elevate HR leadership to inform company direction, talent strategy is a business strategy. I think we all know the importance of workforce planning, skills development, and how crucial that really is to the overall business success. Metrics that matter, what data points and insights should CHROs and others be leveraging to influence their decision making? And how do you be ready for the future, right? Things are constantly evolving and changing. And how can HR lead the way and be really that lead car in this change management, digital transformation, and innovation? So with that, I'm actually going to stop sharing so I can see our amazing panelists here a little bit closer. There they all are. And I've got my questions here as well. So wanted to just jump right into it. So the first question that I have, and any one of our panelists feel free to answer, is how are you seeing CHROs evolve from executing strategy to actively shaping it?
I'll go first, and I'd be curious of what the others say. I think I want to reframe it just a little bit. One of the things I think is how part of our role often is helping shape the executive team. And so one of the things, the expectation at any executive table that I would hope that we would have is that if you observe us, and if I like to have the aspiration of, like, if you observe me in a room full of my peers, you could not decide what function I was. And because ultimately we're business leaders first, and we think with the people lens, but like we're business leaders first. And so for me, I couldn't imagine joining a company. I mean, we've all probably been in teams and where we've had to define, our worth, and we had to like demonstrate value and impact. But if the seat at the table is not at least open for me to take it up and take up space, then I'm not interested in being in that room. And I think like there is it is, though, when you are at that table, is to make sure you take up that space and you can speak with the same level of conviction. I jokingly say to my CFO, I was like, listen, I want to be able, it's not so jokingly, I want to be able to speak to an investor, to a customer, to the street, the same way that he would. Right? I might have a people lens, but I want to be as articulate and knowledgeable about our strategy, about our financial metrics, about the things that move the business as any of my peers or any of like the people in finance. And I think for that, it just builds us credibility. And then you can kind of layer in where our expertise and how we match our strategy to that. But I do think there had been this weird expectation in decades past of, oh, well, that's the softer part of the business. When in reality, like, you can't get anything done without people. And so, anyways, I often say that, and we take that same lens for all executives of, right, like, everybody should be co-creating the strategy. Everybody should be, like, just because you're a certain function doesn't mean that you only hold that spot, if that makes sense.
That's great.
Yeah, Jerry, I think it's so wise what you're saying. I'll just add on to that. I think I see a few different types of HR leaders. And then I see different perspectives from peers, board, customers, CEO, as far as what they expect to. So this bleeds a little bit into, I think, the second topic we were touching on, but they're also interconnected. So I think at an organization where HR is perceived as more of a tactical function, I'm often seeing HR leaders need to demonstrate, hey, by the way, I have command of the business. I understand how the business is run. I understand our products. I can speak to those when it comes to talking to our customers or the street, as you said, Jerry, or the CEO. And it's almost like reshaping the brand of HR just by demonstrating the fact that we have command of the business. If you come from from an organization where they perceive HR as a truly strategic function, that is amazing. I think there's a lot less uphill battle to do that. And so I think very easily you can start to translate business strategy into business, or people strategy into business outcomes, and then back again. And it sort of is like that dance for me, where if you need to start with business strategy to demonstrate that, and then weave in people strategy to start to get people's wheels turning. And I think then it becomes pattern recognition, where people start to see, oh, they understand the business and people relate to that, and vice versa, or back and forth. That's been my experience. So that was what I would add. I loved what you said.
Yeah, it's a great point. Sarah Lynn, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I would just sort of echo what both Robin and Jerry shared, but also just adding, it's important to really understand the business. So anytime I join an organization, it's important for me to understand, what are we trying to solve for? What are those business objectives? And then positioning yourself as that strategic thought partner to then build out a people operations roadmap or strategy that's really at the nexus of the company goals and objectives. And when you're building people-centric initiatives and strategies that support those company goals, that's where you're leveraged as that subject matter expert and seen as more of that strategic arm.
That's great. Now, do you have any real life examples from your own experience or even within your current companies of how this, what strategies you've actually implemented because you have been in the room?
I think for me, it's mostly around M&A. That's the first one that comes to mind. So when we have inorganic growth drivers and bring in new ARR to the company, there's the dollars that will change and how we invest in the company. There's ideally our growth rate. There are new people in the company of varying size and scale, depending on what company you acquired. Sure. And so I think deeply understanding the product integration, how this impacts our business, what the long-term trajectory is of it, what the go-to-market plan is, how we're going to leverage this talent, make it compelling for them and retain them. That's, I think, one example that comes up pretty often for us, just the nature of our business. We've done about 8 of them. And so I think I see that a lot. And there's a nice interconnectedness between myself and my peers in how we talk about this as orchestrating a business system versus these siloed departments all kind of doing their part.
I'm kind of in a weird space where it's like we are an HR tech and solutions business. So if I'm not opining or helping shape the business, then I don't know what I would be doing.
Good point.
I'm generally, we have a lot of subject matter experts in the room, particularly when it comes to, because one side of the business is a PEO platform. So we have a lot of people who understand healthcare, particularly when it comes to benefits. But I'm probably the only one who has touched each part of it, right? From an HR leader, like I've done HRIS solutions. I've implemented a lot of different ones throughout the year to benefit selections across where we also do EOR. And so I've been in very large companies in the past, and I've hired all over the world. And so, it just depends on the topic of like, how do we want to enter into a market to, how do we want to best solution for our customers? And so to me, I feel like it's a great opportunity to do that. In previous lives, I would say, Robin, I would only echo, I've been in highly acquisitive inorganic growth companies in which like you have to match up, like, how does this accelerate our growth? Really being thoughtful about probing and pushing a bit, because I think sometimes like if you're just taking a financial lens, it's quite easy to do the math and be like, all right, this makes sense. For us, it's like pushing, all right, do we want to keep them as standalone? Do we want to integrate them? What are the implications from a people strategy if we do that? What is our long-term strategy for this acquisition? So I think that there's a lot of places in which we could play, but I think one of the things that if you've been on my team, which I see a handful of people who are here who have been, that I'm like, be curious, ask a lot of questions. And I think for sometimes if you have that curiosity, even from a strategy standpoint, you can help start to shape. But there's a lot of different ways, both in previous and current roles, in which just like being curious and asking questions that then tie back to either chemistry, integration, people strategy, helps shape that.
To get more specific and granular on that one, where are places that you would actually encourage HR leaders to try to get a handle on the strategy where maybe historically they aren't, right? So for example, I know we're often called in for compensation plans and changes to benefits, but where are places that are maybe a bit more unconventional for those who might be listening at home that you actually think this is really where you should be in the action?
I'll stop talking if anybody wants to go. I mean, for us, it's like, I think the piece where I don't think we spend enough time, and I advise like startups and scale ups quite a bit, is on the org design. I mean, I know that is our space, but for example, we are working on our org and talent strategy, and part of it is identifying North Star metrics. Rule of 40, we're a SaaS and services company, so like, how do we structure and identify efficiency from an AI lens, as well as just like services? So partner with finance, but partner with our customer service team to really help drive strategy when it comes to structure. And so I think what I find often is that you're not probing enough on the structure of the company and leading towards that. And particularly like if you've been in growth businesses, I think so often we're downstream and we are just catching whatever coming to us, and then we are trying to get ahead of it. And so like what I like to do is like flip that of being like, okay, what's our strategy? I would say if you're an HR leader, you should be part of the strategic planning, full stop, so that you can understand and probe. But then the other piece of that is like map your operating system to match with the business operating system so that you can identify the spots in which you should be in. But for me, I would say the one that seems obvious, I think, to probably most people on this call, but you probably have a hard time stepping in, is on the org design and putting that as part of your operating system that then can lead. And I mean, for us, it helps also map out our roadmap from a product and tech standpoint too. So I think that one's probably an obvious one, but I would say like wherever you can go upstream versus get downstream and get part of the first part versus like being on the receiving end. If you've already gotten it, the strategy is already fully baked, then like do your best, but like try to get ahead of that.
Absolutely. And I think I've experienced that for sure, because I think when you're building out an org chart or thinking about how you want to design an optimal organization, it's names on pages. There's no feelings. There's no downstream impact. It's just sort of moving sticky notes on a board. And leaders often think, well, I've got that part down, right? I can figure that all out myself. I'll call in HR when we need to communicate this or understand the ramifications. But so much of that kind of comes in that first initial design. I think it's really hard to play catch up if you're not kind of helping them think about the level mix and who is their bench and how does this play into the hiring that they want to do. I think there's so much opportunity. Thank you for that answer. Anyone else have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I would just say it's probably more standard, but as I think about it, I would say hiring strategy, but from the beginning, right? Because oftentimes I think our position, CHRO, head of people, leading both the core function of HR and talent, it's often you're given a list of requisitions, but I think getting ahead of it to really understand what are we trying to solve for, helping leaders and managers understand where the gaps exist, and giving different strategies other than just external hires. How are we up leveling our existing talent? How are we retaining that existing talent? A lot of times, I think in tech in particular, we focus so much on how do we attract top talent, which is key and it's important. But what I think is equally important is focusing on the retention of that top talent, thinking of the long-term strategies around succession planning and being thought-provoking with those peers at that table to sort of think of not only the roadmap, but the product, customer, and giving them that framework to work within as you're really owning that strategy versus being sort of the order taker of fill X amount of recs, but understanding, are these crucial? Are these strategic? And do we have other options that we have with the existing talent to leverage simultaneously as we're thinking of the long-term org structure?
I love that. I had a people leader at Facebook a long time ago who used to call the HR organization, their pillars were find, grow, and keep. And I always think that's the simplest way to really think about what we are really trying to do. Well, great. I'm going to ask another question. So it sounds like you all work at amazing companies that are very evolved and inclusive and kind of bringing you in, into that leadership seat at the table. For those who are listening, who are trying to find their way to the table, right? Or find their way going from, getting that downstream information, Jerry, that you talked about, to being much more upstream. What advice or suggestions do you have so they can start to grasp a little bit more of that space to fill it better in service of their leadership, and their companies?
I can jump in on that one. It's actually a very nice parlay into the topic we were just covering as well. So my team, and again, I'm sort of afforded with the it's a highlight, and also the shadow side of having not grown up in HR, I think affords me the fresh beginner's mind perspective on it, which can work really well in my favor, and also not so much some days. So it depends on the problem. But the way that I advise my team, who are very seasoned HR experts, on their better command of the business, I typically send them to 3 places. And I will help make these make sense, because the first one is not going to make sense. One is being in the board meeting with your board of directors. The second one is having command over your OKR, your V2 Mom, whatever goal setting cadence and tool you use. And then the third is sales calls or being customer facing.
Interesting.
All 3 of those, most companies, there is a way to access that information without necessarily being in it. So board meeting, it could be as simple as, hey, Chief People Officer, can you set up a 30-minute quarterly meeting 2 days after the board meeting and just give us the highlight reel of what's coming out of that?
Right.
If you roll up to a different org, maybe you roll to a COO or whatever, whoever your leader is, if they're not willing to do that, they're not the right leader, because that should be an amazing cascade of, here are the highlights, the lowlights, here are the themes. These are areas we're thinking about investing in. The board is trying on for size. We're not sure. Here are the questions the board asked, because I would love for anyone at any stage of their career to start to understand, here's what's happening in the board's brain. So by the time they get in a boardroom, they can start to anticipate what's being asked and how those meetings feel. I also involve my team very heavily in the board prep. So 1, it creates positive leverage for me. And 2, it gives them accountability, because they're like, oh, I understand what she's going to need to go in. So it's a win-win. The OKRs are goal setting. What I advise people is go through everything on there, and a good OKR will have a responsible party. If you can't give in layman's terms, this is what this thing is, and this is why it matters to the business, go reach out to the person, set up a one-on-one and understand it. So then as you navigate the business, you advise on org strategy or whatever your thing is, you are able to say, I deeply understand how our business is being orchestrated. And now I can kind of architect what I need to for my job with a much more sophisticated lens. And then the last one is sales calls. That category it could also just be community, whether it's your investors or your buyers or your prospects or your salespeople. You might have gongs, so you can listen to a gong recording. I would bet you any of your salespeople who you have a good relationship would be happy to have you shadow a call. What that gives you is both, it's multi-directional. So 1, you understand, how do we talk about our product? How do we sell it? How do we make it compelling? And 2, you start to understand, here are the questions that the community and the market is asking. So Sarah Lynn, to your point, you're doing talent planning and you're saying, well, hey, I'm noticing in the 10 that I've shadowed recently, this customer is concerned about this, this, and this. Have we thought about trying to map our talent to some of the needs of the customers? So whenever I'm giving that feedback to my team, I'm like, if you spend even 10% of your time over the course of the year on this combination of 3, I think you will, by default, people will notice it and they will see you have better command of the business, and you'll elevate faster, is my theory and my hope.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And at Rad AI recently, one of our HR leaders wanted to go on the commercial team offsite. And so we said, absolutely, that would be a fantastic use of time. And I think it initially raised an eyebrow, because why do they need to go to that, right? They're just going to be talking about the customers and the sales calls. But the HR person came back with so much information, right? And so many interesting nuggets, because it always comes back to people. It always comes back to resourcing and talent and how we're kind of taking care of the heartbeat of the business. And so I think that's such great advice. Hope everybody wrote that down. I know I jotted down a few notes, because that was fantastic. Does anyone else have anything else to add to that discussion point? Jerry, you came off mute.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people to go to Gong all the time. I mean, if you're not in your sales channels, if you're not like also that's just, it always gives me energy when I'm on my sales channels of being like, what's deals have been closed, and how we often do a write-up on like how we are, why we won, or what is, how, how are we showing up for customers? Because I think that gives us fodder and just understanding of like, of how we're competing in the marketplace. But yeah, and I only echo all the things that Robin had said, but I do think like if you don't know how, like I have a handful of my TA people on this call, and I'm like, we are ultimately the marketers that show up for people all the time, right? So like we need to be able to speak in the same way that our salespeople do. And so like, so I think the gong, if you have whatever you have, like, I also shadow. I think every single business leader would give you space and time to do that. And you don't know until you ask. And the worst thing that they could do is say no.
Exactly. Well, moving along. So next question, how is your organization linking talent strategy directly to business outcomes? I think we touched a little bit on this earlier, but want to go back and revisit it because I do think it's an important one.
I'll talk about AI. I mean, I think this is one, and Robin used OKRs. And so we have company-wide OKRs, and I think out of the top company level OKRs, because each function has their own, there's 5 of them that are people related that are all around talent strategy and organizational. One of the ones is around AI proficiency and enablement around AI. And I think we talked a lot about how do we make sure, I mean, it's obviously the topic of the year, I think, or the years, but how do we make sure that we're enabling our business to be utilizing it, et cetera. So we set a very, very basic enablement measurement where we have it within our engagement survey, and our OKR on it is, 80% of our population has proficient use of AI. And so we have an enterprise wide license when it comes to Gemini. A lot of us use different things. And so it's really making sure that we're partnering with the business in terms of enabling them and having our strategy around that. So I think that that's one really super tactical one of being like, all right, what's current, what's absolutely needed, and then how do we insert ourselves in terms of enabling the business to do that. And that one I think is really basic of like, we're doing AI 101. We have a whole name and a whole campaign internally about it. I'm sure others do too. But like that's one of them that we've partnered with our data and insights team as well as our L&D team to really drive that. And we have a people AI governance group that actually meets on a monthly basis that helps drive our AI strategy. But it is a people strategy at the end of the day.
Great.
For us, yes, plus, we're doing a lot of the same stuff. So I won't repeat Jerry there because I think that was very insightful. The thing I've been trying to educate our team on, which I think really makes sense because there's a lot of data to back this up, at a very high level, eNPS drives NPS, which drives customer retention, which creates exit value for the company. If you were to just boil it down into like what's the equation that makes us all tick, there is a lot of data to suggest why NPS is pulled by a positive eNPS, and of course retention is definitely driven by an increasing NPS score. Part of that works very well for our company because we are in the customer success industry, and so the software we sell, the story we tell, is very conducive to getting people motivated around an increasing retention rate and making your customers happy. And so being able to take the language that I know will resonate for my team to help to influence them in our favor, or what I'm trying to kind of get them to mobilize around, if I can use that as the anchor point and say, we're all trying to create exit value, we are PE backed. So that'll make sense to most. And then this is our bread and butter. This is what we sell. So therefore, us focused on eNPS as one of a few metrics that we look at is in our best interest. And then once they've got sort of the ecosystem organized in their brain, I have found it much easier to influence change on, well, this is why we need to invest here in L&D, and this is why we should adopt this AI tool. I'm probably speaking your language, Sarah Lynn, with what you do. And so that's sort of been kind of like the general flow that I've seen to be helpful. And I'm a data geek, so seeing the data and how one influences the other is super interesting to me personally.
Yeah, I would agree with both Robin and what Jerry has shared as well. Even going back to what Jerry said earlier, sort of blending that curiosity with some of the talent strategies and sort of linking your skills, the talent that you have, to product roadmap, customer needs, and then really analyzing your existing workforce, using that data to drive decision making. Particularly, what I can tell you, was a big area of opportunity here was upskilling the existing talent versus always saying we need to hire externally. Like let's invest in the existing talent that we have. It's more cost effective, and it has a faster turnaround for the velocity that we're looking for.
Great. We did have a question. I think a lot of you have touched on it though, but I'm going to read it aloud in case there was any other thoughts. So Catherine from the chat asked, as CHROs, you are tasked with architecting the future workforce. How is the accelerating adoption of AI, particularly Gen AI, fundamentally changing your approach to strategic workforce planning, talent development, and the design of the employee experience? What are the biggest opportunities and ethical considerations you're navigating as you integrate AI into these core strategic functions? Sounds like Jerry Lynn, sounds like you have,
she's on my team. She's on my team. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, I mean, this is like what we are embarking on, right? It's really interesting. I was thinking about it because this came up probably 6 to 8 months ago. One of our board members and I had a side chat, and he's a serial entrepreneur, and he was like, yeah, if I'm starting a new business now, the way that I would do org design is completely different than I would have ever done before. And I don't know why I hadn't thought about it that way before. Like, right, like if you take a white paper, like a white sheet of paper, or build, like, how would you design your org differently? And we are doing some of that, of like, it's, to me, I just feel like it's an accelerator versus anything else. And so I think from a workforce planning perspective, Catherine knows we talk a lot about that internally, of like, it's not the fact that like, what is the, as anybody else is like, what are the tasks that don't need human intervention that we can automate, we can do faster. And so we talk a lot about that. One of the things in which we provide that we believe is a differentiator for us is our customer service, right? We have HR consultants that support our small businesses all the time. And so how do we make sure that they have enough time so we can take out the administrative tasks so that they can spend their time in that? So from a workforce planning perspective, like, we spend a lot of time on our strategy on thinking about like our talent and org strategy design work of like, AI has to be at the forefront. What are we missing? How are we thinking about that? We're co-creating it with our head of AI data of like, what are our foundational points and how does that influence how we are shaping and thinking about our business? I do think we're still at the forefront. I'm sure there's other companies that do this really well in terms of like enablement, expectations. How are we thinking about that? How are we providing the right tools and resources to our people? But I mean, for us, it's one of those where even in our performance management discussions, it's like, how are they utilizing it? Like, what are they, like, how are they not utilizing it? And making sure it's coming up as an area in which of importance, because otherwise, people will get left behind. And to kind of Sarah Lynn's point, it's like, it's the upskilling versus like just, making sure that you're hiring people who know how to do it. So I think it's such an opportunity to really, to upskill your team, make sure that they have the tools and resources, and also model. We do a lot of like bragging, like we talk about like, how are you utilizing, what are the use cases that you're doing it, and doing it in public forums so that people know. And so our CEO is modeling it too, which is helpful, right? But for us, I think it's a work in progress. I think I'm really curious in an area of it, but I do think as HR leaders, one of the goals for me and my leadership team is like, we want to be experts in this. Like, we just feel like this is one of those areas where it's like, be super curious about it, be experts, ask all the questions, and understand that like it's ever evolving. So I spend a lot of time with our investors. I spend a lot of time with our board members we have Thrive Capital, for example, on our board, who have led the round for OpenAI. So, be curious, ask people. But I would say it's one of those where I think we'll continue to evolve.
Well, I think it's such a good point to bring up this notion of a blank piece of paper, because so much, I think, of what we actually deal with are systems and processes that have been iterated and entangled and built upon so much that to undo them is such a high cost that it is always good for us as leaders to say, if I were starting over tomorrow, what would I do? Because there's probably something we could be iterating on, but it always just feels so daunting
Yep.
when you know, especially as you start joining companies that are 10, 20, 30, 40 years old, to figure out why they made the decision, and you start just making micro changes versus feeling as though you could be bold, right? And what are the newer companies doing that don't have, you know, that aren't bogged down by these same things?
I think if you don't take that perspective, Janelle, I think you'll look up in 10 years and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind.
Exactly. We had another question from the chat. So Yuli mentioned that we spoke about aligning business strategies, and also put in a plug for a book that they wrote called PTSD in the Boardroom. And he talks about, and he has two questions for us. The first is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do your execs identify micro threats that silently impact growth? And the second question is, can deeper listening to employees, not just markets, help leaders respond better? Any of those resonate with you?
Yeah, I think all of this, to be a well-run business and a a high-performing leader, both things have to exist: the human element and how you operate a business and listen to markets and do all of that. So I think, Yuli, it's an astute observation. I think there are lots of companies that rotate really hard on business objectives at the cost of the human dynamics. Our mission at Gainsight has been one of the best mission statements of a company I've worked at. And so I'll share it, not to be Gainsight-esque, but just because it resonates for me. So the mission is to be living proof that you can win in business while being human first. And how we talk about that to our employees is that human first means making hard decisions in a human first way. It doesn't mean that we avoid the hard decisions. It doesn't mean that we avoid a layoff if we need to do a layoff. It means that how we do it and how we orchestrate it matters just as much as meeting our margins and our business objectives. So I'm not sure how to rate my team from 1 to 10 on, you know, whether they impact growth or not. But I will say that we have a lot of practices around our values and actions. We have a very high bar for what we expect of our leaders from a human potential and human capital standpoint, and how we conduct ourselves and how we operate with each other. And it is as important, if not more important, than how we run our business.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the piece that you mentioned around deeply listening to employees and the impact that that has is huge. In fact, sort of shifting the formula in the HR space from being reactive as things sort of hit your desk and taking a proactive approach, very high touch, leaning in. When I join any organization, I take it upon myself and the team, the people and culture team, to meet with every single employee, understanding, again, the workforce that you're serving. It allows you to get ahead of some of those challenges and to be strategic and proactive and problem solving and finding resolve versus constantly putting out fires, which I think was sort of what HR used to be, only tapped when and if things hit the fan. And so shifting that formula and getting at the forefront of that, I think, is imperative. And it's certainly important to the leadership team here at Sonus as well. They're curious. We use data to drive decision making. We're constantly looking at, you know, what our people are saying, so that we can make sure that this is an employer of choice at the end of the day, which will ultimately impact the bottom line and help us be more productive and efficient.
Great. We have another question in the chat. I think that'll be the last one, and then we're going to start to wind down. This has been an awesome session, and I love all of the discussion that's going on both live and in the chat. So Catherine also asked another one, which I think is a great one. Looking ahead, what do you believe will be the most critical skill or competency for aspiring HR leaders and CHROs to possess to remain effective architects of the business strategy in the next 5 to 10 years? I feel like we touched a little bit on AI as an obvious one, but I'm curious if you think there are others out there.
I'm gonna still be old school on this one. I do think still, like, I think the skill set of really understanding the business and applying that from a people lens is going to still remain. I think that is where AI won't play, right? And I think from a need of how we show up and how we take up space, that will always still be something that I think is going to be really hard to replicate at the moment. I mean, obviously, like we all use AI as a sounding board, but whatever your choice is. But I do think continuing, like, hone your business skills, become really fluent in financial metrics. I think one of the best things that you could do is continue to, like, be comfortable in those spaces, because you can take up space and understand how to apply it. So I think that that's the part where a lot of HR leaders have missed out, and we are usually playing catch up of trying to understand what does this mean and how does it apply. So I would say continue to hone your business acumen and encourage people who are future HR leaders to get their MBA or go and get their business degree or take those learnings and just be really curious. So I know that that's probably an obvious one, but I'm a firm believer of it.
I love it.
Yeah, I'll just add on. I'll have to drum it up and I'll share it with the group. But I had a conversation with one of our operating managing directors at the private equity firm that we work with, Vista. And he had said the best advice that I could give to any CXO, so I think this is broadly speaking, is to think like a CEO. So I think, Jerry, what you shared, knowing your business metrics and having command of that, I think makes a lot of sense. So I realize this is sort of a meta suggestion. It's not super tactical. But I think if at the end of the day, in the beginning of the day, you're showing up saying, like, how would I think like a CEO if I was responsible for running this company? And then how do I leverage HR and that function as a lever to create success in running this company? I think you're already 10 steps ahead of probably most of your peers. And then finding all of the micro movements you do throughout the day to make that thing true is probably a very high level, maybe the barometer to go into your day with for the future of architecting the strategy, to your question.
Yes, I agree with both. I think I'll take a different approach, which would be, focusing on the EQ as much as the IQ, right? We often hear the hard skills get you in the door, and that's true, but the soft skills keep you there. So leaning into leading with transparency and empathy, having those difficult conversations, making difficult decisions, but doing so with a human component, are things that I think will continue to be imperative and won't be replaced by AI for years to come.
I love that. I was in a meeting a couple of months ago. I had missed a leadership meeting, and I was reading the notes that the AI note taker took, and then I listened back to the audio recording, and they were wildly different, because you can hear things like tension and uncomfortable silences, but AI is not going to say, this meeting got a little awkward, right? It's not going to show up in the summary. And so I think never underestimating the power of the human part of being in human resources, right? Of being in the room, of understanding visual and physical cues and silence, and how to interpret that, I think is wildly powerful. Want to say thank you to everybody who had questions in the chat. I'm going to ask us one more question before we close out of the group. And so Robin, Jerry, Sarah Lynn, you all have been fantastic. Any words to live by, any advice, any mantra that you have taken with you in your career that's really helped you, that you would like to leave with people, that is, something you say to yourself, or something, words to live by as you've navigated these really, really impressive careers at these amazing companies?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Any advice?
I've got so many mantras, Janelle. It depends on the day of which one I apply.
That was your Thursday mantra, Jerry.
Yeah, no, it's I those that are on this call that know me know I am a Brene Brown acolyte. So it's like I'm also Southern, and I'm from Texas. So it's like one of those where in days in which I need it, I think I go back to my well of all the things for her. But one of the things I think for me is just clarity is kind. Clarity in terms of your role, clarity in terms of like what is best for you. I think that is one mantra that sticks with me as well. But the other thing I say to my team all the time, it's like, I believe my personal belief is you get one chance at this life, and we didn't wake up to be mediocre. So let's choose to do the hard things, and that they matter.
I love that.
Oh, go ahead, Sarah Lynn. I'll go after you.
Say I love that, and I often I also love Brene Brown, and certainly use that mantra of clarity is kindness. And it's been great because it pairs well with sort of the work that we're doing here at Sonus around communication and clarity. So I love that. So double click on that. But another one of my mantras I would say is again centered around vulnerability and being brave enough to have those candid conversations. So another author, Kim Scott, Radical Candor, it's a framework we use here. It's something we're trying to embed into the culture around creating that culture of feedback. And so constantly creating that space to challenge directly while caring deeply, and working to find that balance is a mantra of mine, and something we're hoping to instill into our leaders here at Sonus as well.
Amazing. Robin?
So it just came to me. There's an article, and I'll just drop the link in the chat here. It's pretty dated. It's actually from 2011, and just to be provocative, don't be alarmed. The title is "Nobody Cares," and I think that's really resonated for me because I care a lot. I care about business. I care about the people I'm with. For better or for worse, I take things personally, and then when I've had a second to sort of like let it go, it's fine. It's a non-thing. I think. But all of us are human people. You lead back to your question. We're all trying to be human first. This article always stuck with me because it's basically the premise that like everybody's got their stuff. And at the end of the day, we all feel sorry for ourselves. And like, this is the biggest thing to happen to us since sliced bread. And then at the end of the day, no one cares. You've got to care for yourself, look out for yourself. There are people who do care about you. The idea is that like, it's not that, no one gives a flying, what about you. It's just that everybody's got their stuff.
Sure.
It's almost like my big takeaway, I'm sure other people have different ones, is don't take yourself too seriously. It's all going to be okay. At the end of the day, most of us are running software companies that are not saving lives. If you work for a company that is saving life, I love that. That is so awesome. You really are. So please keep doing what you're doing. But like, it's all going to be okay.
Shout out to all the brain surgeons who have dialed in today, who are doing the real work.
Right? Yeah.
We appreciate you. Well, fantastic. I'm just going to pop open our slides here one more time so we can conclude. And just want to remind everybody, we've got a couple more episodes for the remainder of the summer. Episode 12, we're going to be talking about the path to CHRO, which I think should be a really exciting one for those who are interested in kind of breaking into this industry. And then episode 13 in September, we'll be balancing AI and people-centric organizations. I think so much of everything that we're talking about is just at this intersection point between AI and everything else that's going on. And that should be really fascinating. And then in October, we have culture-led growth, how values-driven leadership fuels performance and profit. So I just wanted to say thank you again to GoLinks for sponsoring this event, and to our amazing speakers and panelists today. I know I learned a tremendous amount. We had some laughs, we shared some great nuggets, and we had some really great banter from the chat. So thank you, all of you, and hope to see everyone for our next sessions. Have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.